Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for the Royal Society of Chemistry's ChemCareers webinar on a career in academic research. My name is Robert Bowles. I'm a career specialist here with the Royal Society of Chemistry. I'm joined today by Dr. John Hardy from Lancaster University. Say hello, John.
Hello there. Hi there.
Graeme Barker from Heriot University, and also Marie-Alix from Vitae. We're going to be talking for about 45 minutes or so about a career in academic research. I just thought I'd start off really by just asking our speakers today just to kind of introduce themselves and just tell us a little bit about what they're currently doing. John, would you like to go first?
Oh, of course. So I'm a recently appointed lecturer up at Lancaster University. I trained in chemistry as an undergrad at Bristol and York, and then bounced around overseas for about 10 years. Before coming back, and the focus of my research here is materials chemistry and developing materials that interact with electricity, light and magnetism, and using them for medical or technical applications.
Okay, thank you, John. And Graeme, you next?
Hi there, I'm a recently appointed lecturer at Heriot University. I did my PhD at York before a couple of postdoctoral positions, and I was appointed to my current position in September last year. The focus of my research here is the development of new asymmetric synthetic methodologies using group 1 and 2 organometallic reagents, as well as a bit of medicinal chemistry.
Okay, fantastic. And finally, Marie?
Hi everyone, I'm Marie-Alix Thouaille and I'm a project manager at Vitae, which is an organisation dedicated to the career development of researchers. And today I'll be talking a bit about practical strategies for career development.
That's great. So before we get started, I thought I'd ask you to introduce yourselves as well. So it's always useful for us to have an idea of who it is that has actually joined us today. So I'm just going to launch a poll. This will come up on screen. Just asking you to indicate what your current career stage is. So that should be coming up on your screen now. So you're filling it in. Just to let you know, while you're doing that, there will be the chance for you to ask questions. We're not going to have you chatting, but there is the chance for you to type in your questions whenever you like. I've got a colleague here who's going to be having a look through those questions, so we can currently ask those towards the end of the talk. We'll get around to them and hopefully answer as many as you can. So looks like we're nearly done with the polling. 90% of you have voted, so great stuff for that. So really interesting. Okay, we've got 74% of you are currently doing a PhD. We've got 10% first or second postdoc, and we've got about 15% not currently in academia. So very interesting. So it looks like we've very much got early career researchers joining us today. Okay, so with that in mind, we'll see if we can kind of make it a bit more relevant to you based on that. So what we're going to cover today is really thinking about looking at how to develop that career in academia, in academic research. We're going to focus on really in the kind of end goal, I guess. A lot of people for going into academia, they are looking for that kind of permanent lectureship or research position at the end of it. So we've got a couple of success stories from John and Graeme that we can explore in a bit more detail. We'll also cover a bit of information looking at the skills and qualities that you really need to be a kind of successful academic. We're going to touch briefly towards the end on sort of how to find jobs, how to make applications. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail today. If you do want more support on that, we can discuss that towards the end of it. And then we're going to finish off really looking at the support that's available from both the Royal Society of Chemistry and from Vitae as well. So just to kind of get things going, these are things that we've sort of recognised as being the main things that you need to be developing to have that successful career in academia. So the first one is probably the most obvious to you at your moment. So looking at your publication record, you know, the science, are you producing good scientific output, good research output? Where is it being published? And the volume that you're producing as well. Also, the kind of importance of developing some teaching experience, and we can kind of get onto that a bit later on. Again, opportunities to develop that as you do go through your PhD or postdocs. Really important to having a successful academic career at the end. And the third thing that's becoming more important is really the ability to generate some income. And now that could be grant income, it could be income from other companies or other collaborators, and also then being able to show the impact of your research. So rather than just doing it in isolation, academic research, you've got to be able to show the impact of it, the outputs from it. That's becoming more and more important. So again, that's something we can discuss in a bit more detail with our speakers today. So I'm going to start off, if I may, with John. So we've got John's career story up on the screen. As he mentioned earlier, he's currently at Lancaster University. Do you just want to talk us through what you've put up there on the screen, John, and kind of just explain a bit more about kind of what each of those roles meant to you, what you're doing there, how you kind of took it forward? So yeah, over to you, John.
Okay, so I kicked off as an undergraduate at Bristol, and that was a really enjoyable experience. Bristol's obviously a lively city, and it's a really good department of chemistry. And as I was progressing through the teaching labs there, I got opportunities to undertake internships. So I spent my first 2 summers at GSK doing paper pushing, and in my 3rd summer, I was offered the opportunity to do some lab work at GSK, doing some synthetic chemistry, some peptide and heterocycle chemistry, which was a really useful experience, because I realized when I was there that in addition to obviously learning what you learn at, as undergrads, you're not necessarily prepared to go on to be completely independent when you go into the workplace. And so that in part inspired me to go on to do a PhD. And I also had a really enjoyable experience during my final year project in kind of physical chemistry, polymers and colloids and things like this. And then I spent the next summer working with a startup company which was based within the university, doing contract research for a variety of different companies, and also wrapping up my undergraduate project to the point where we could squeeze a publication out of it. I bounced off up to York to do my PhD, and what was nice about the position in York, it was with a chap called Dave Smith, who's a really lively and entertaining person to work with. It was a marriage of synthetic chemistry and physical chemistry, so I was making soft materials and studying their properties, so I got a really broad experience, and it was sponsored by industry, and that was a really useful thing as well, because it meant I got to spend 3 months in Syngenta, based at the Huddersfield site. And so I pitched up at Huddersfield. Within the first week, they'd called everyone into the main hall and told them that the chemical that the site was producing was going to stop being produced because the competition from Monsanto was too tough. And so everyone was going to have to look for jobs within the next 2 years. And so that was a really interesting experience, because I got to see the kind of side of industry that's not necessarily really comfortable or entertaining to watch. And that definitely spurred me on to not to work really in industry over the course of my career. And what it also did was free me up completely with my PhD. So I didn't have to work on the project that industry had assigned, really, which was formulation for agrochemicals. And instead I could do some really weird and wonderful stuff. And so I spoke to my boss and said, look, I'd like to go and work overseas, but I don't speak any foreign languages. So maybe like the States or Australia. And we began to apply for scholarships for travel to support exchange activities. And so I picked up a scholarship from the World Universities Network to go and spend 3 months working at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And so out there, I was making materials or making branched peptides, dendrimers, that would bind to DNA and then would enable them to be transported across cell membranes and then unpackaged inside the cell so that you could deliver the DNA. So it's basically a drug delivery system or a system of non-viral gene therapy. And that was a really, really interesting experience. That was a good time to be there because I worked with a chap called Dan Pack, who was a postdoc for a guy called Bob Langer. And Bob Langer's the world's most highly cited engineer. So with more than 100,000 citations already. So that was a really interesting experience. I spent time out there, and then I came back to wrap up my PhD. And from my boss, that offered the opportunity to start a new area of research, so working on gene therapy, and that's been highly productive for him in terms of the number of publications that came out. And it's also helped the student who was working with me on this to secure a faculty position back home in Finland. And it was about the second year of my PhD that I began to publish things, and then I thought it's time to apply for postdoctoral positions now. And so I was offered a couple of different postdoctoral positions, and the one I took was out in France, working with Jean-Marie Lynns, which was a really interesting experience again. It's a great lab to work in. It was about 20 people. 90% of the people who were working in the lab were postdocs, and it offered me an opportunity to do a bit more work in supramolecular chemistry. And as I progressed during my time in France, I worked on a variety of different projects. We squeezed out a publication and a review article, and I met some people. So the laboratory there was it's very kind of very interestingly organised in 5 levels of the building. Each of the different levels does a completely different topic of research, and there's industrial partners that are integrated into the building. So there's some SMEs who are based there, but also BASF have a satellite lab there. And BASF had organised a conference inside the same building, and that's where I met the guy who was subsequently to become my next postdoctoral supervisor. And so I picked up a scholarship to work in France, and I was lucky enough to pick up another scholarship to go and work in Germany. And this time I picked up one of the Humboldt fellowships, and so that gave me funding for a bit more than a year to spend in the Scheibel research group. And in this research group, I did some completely different area of research. So it's protein engineering and generating biomaterials for drug delivery tissue engineering. And that was a really good, fun experience. I spent about 3 years there in total, after which I wanted to do, basically I thought, I've only worked for guys during my career, and I think it would be a fantastic experience to work for a woman. And so I wrote to people in Australia, the north of the US and the south of the US, so Texas. And I got offers from each of those, and it was when I decided to move to Texas because I thought, I'm going to hate it here. It will be full of racists and homophobes, and that will catalyse me to return to the UK much, much faster. But I realised actually when I pitched up in Austin, it was fantastic. The nightlife's great, the working environment was really good, and I had a really, really enjoyable time out there. And so I spent 4 years there in total. We moved from Austin to Florida during this time, and it was when I moved to Florida that I thought I really want to transition now to being an academic. And so then I put my head down and wrote a lot of papers. So in that duration, I think I wrote about 10 or 15 papers in that year, and I started to also write patents. And at the point where we had our first patent online, I got an email from Queen's University of Belfast to ask me how I feel about moving to Belfast. To which my response was, well, absolutely terrified. I value my kneecaps. But then I chatted to them and said, oh, actually, it's going to be a great experience for you. The person you work with also worked for the guy you work with in France, and the science is deeply integrated with industry. So I was being sponsored by industry to do this research. And that offered me opportunities to go out to Boston and Ireland, where their sites were, and do some really nice research with them. And about 6 months into my time in Belfast, I was lucky enough to have a successful interview. But if you jump onto the next slide,
yeah,
then you'll see some of the pain I've gone through in order to get the position.
Yeah, moving now. Okay.
Okay. So during the course of all of these postdocs, I applied for almost 30 positions in total. Some in the UK, some overseas, and as you progress and you produce more research and you've got more experience, the likelihood of picking up interviews is obviously a bit greater. But it was only basically after almost 10 years doing postdocs that I was lucky enough to pick up a position successfully. And if you jump to the next slide.
Yeah.
So the things that have helped me in order to secure my position were teaching experience in York for undergraduates, so both theoretical and practical work. In Bayreuth, a bit of curriculum design. In Belfast, mentoring students. And in the USA, certainly mentoring students. So I looked after approximately 30 students while I was in the USA, and maybe 10 in Germany, and a couple in York and Belfast. And all of this was quite interdisciplinary. Then I've also undertaken a lot of other weird and wonderful activities. So peer review of manuscripts, editorial work for books and journals, including editing a book for the RSC, volunteering with various different societies, from chemistry societies and biomedical engineering societies and things like this, and then outreach with schools, TV appearances to talk about research and stuff like that. And then in terms of research, obviously, as I highlighted earlier on, obviously you've got to be publishing. The research published tends to be very interdisciplinary. It's also highly collaborative, so you can broaden the scope of the research question that you answer. There's an awful lot of industrial engagement in the research that I undertake. So from my PhD through engaging with multinationals and SMEs, even with startups in the States. And then as you progress, you make patents, which are potentially really interesting. When you look at hiring committees are interested in if you have patents, because patents can be worth, in principle, more than publications, because it could be a source of revenue for the university. Obviously, publications as corresponding author helps because it demonstrates your independence, and then picking up awards and fellowships and things like this. And obviously in the States, I was lucky enough to pick up a research grant for about $400,000. So these sorts of things demonstrate that you have some degree of skill in writing grant applications, which will be incredibly important when you start as your independent career. So now we should certainly move on to someone else to speak.
That's great. Thanks very much, John. So I think that the kind of things I'm getting from there is really kind of, there's a lot of interdisciplinary, there's a lot of kind of meeting people, building up your academic networks. That seems to be very important. And then actually looking at the uses and the applications of the research, that seems to be highly valued as well. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think industrial engagement. So speak to industry, because when you begin to write grant applications, it's important that you have industry on board with those, and industry can give you some really useful advice and guidance when you're putting your grant applications together.
Great, thanks very much, John. So we're going to move on to Graeme now. So this is Graeme's career story. Over to you, Graeme.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just quickly run through my career to date before I move on to speak about my applications to try and achieve independence and what helps me. So I graduated with an MChem from the University of St Andrews in 2007. While I was there, in the year 2005 to 2006, I did an industrial placement at the GlaxoSmithKline site in Harlow, which is now closed. And that did give me a fairly extensive bit of experience for that career level in medicinal chemistry. I have to admit that I didn't really enjoy it that much. So the main thing that I took from that experience was a push towards a more academic career path. So I think, bear in mind that you can choose career destinations to suit what you enjoy. I also did summer placement projects in research groups at St Andrews, which I found very enjoyable. And indeed, I continued one of those projects for my MChem final year project, finishing in 2007, which has now been published, which was quite nice. I also did a bit of outreach during my undergraduate career, so I was involved in a number of outreach projects organised by the university rather than specifically based within chemistry, which looked at mentoring pupils at local, what you might call deprived schools, and sort of not so much encouraging them towards the university career path as being able to demonstrate that it wasn't something that they should be scared of or feel disencouraged from. So having graduated from St Andrews, I moved to the University of York to do a PhD in Group 1 organometallic synthetic methodology with Peter O'Brien. I've just realised that I was probably working in the lab upstairs to the one that John had just vacated. That was co-funded by Merck and was supposed to involve a 3-month placement in industry in New Jersey, but unfortunately at the start of my second year the site closed, so I wasn't able to do that, but we were able to still work very closely with the chemistry team in process chemistry at Merck that I was going to be hosting me, and we got a number of publications together with them, and indeed they ended up sending samples for me to purify and analyze to get a final publication as well. As John pointed out, getting some teaching experience is pretty important, so I did do a fair amount of undergraduate lab demonstrating during my PhD, and I was also able to persuade my supervisor to allow me to personally supervise final year project students, both MChems and BScs, which is I really enjoyed that experience, but I think looks good on the CV as well. Finally, the thing that I tried to take advantage of during my PhD was, since we're with the industrial placement problems, we were slightly freer in our range of research than we might have been, was to really pursue as large a range of research areas as possible within the synthetic methodology remit. And indeed, I seem to have perfected the trick of getting a few initial results on a given project and then handing them over to another PhD down the line to really up the number of publications there, which is something I would encourage everyone to have a think about. During my final 6 months in York, we collaborated with a group in Sheffield on lithiation of benzylic amines as a route to quaternary stereocenter bearing products. And in fact, I subsequently moved to a postdoctoral position in that group at Sheffield, looking at the metallation of nitrile substrates using magnesium compounds as another route to quaternary stereocenters. So again, I wanted to pursue a bit of teaching while at Sheffield, but I felt I'd done quite a lot of undergraduate lab demonstrating, and I didn't really need that much more experience of that. So I arranged to teach 2 groups per semester of second and or third year undergraduate chemists, which is my first experience of teaching chemistry material rather than demonstrating in labs. Again, I found that I really enjoyed that experience, and it's something I've tried to keep up during my postdoctoral positions. And I also did, again, a fair bit of supervising of final year project students. One of the things I felt that really helped me during that postdoctoral position was some of the skills that were perhaps not traditional to an organic methodologist that I'd picked up in York, such as, for example, doing in situ infrared monitoring of reactions. I was able to apply to our reaction systems in Sheffield, which were instrumental in getting some of the results that we were able to obtain in Sheffield, and B, that I could pass on to other members of the group. So another lesson to take, I think, is don't be afraid to go away and learn new scientific techniques that are perhaps uncommon in your research area, because you may well be able to apply them at other research positions in the future. So by this point, I'd done a PhD in Group 1 organometallic compounds and then a postdoc using Group 2 organometallic compounds. I thought it's time to really change area. So I was scouting around, and I subsequently then moved to a second postdoctoral position at Heriot working with Dr. Ailan Lee, doing gold 1 catalysis. I will say that the skill set for gold catalysis is probably as far as you can possibly get from Group 1 and 2 synthesis, while still remaining within the organic methodology remit. So this was more or less training myself again from scratch in the skills and knowledge required to complete this postdoctoral position. So it was essentially like getting a whole new PhD's worth of experience, which I think probably helped me when it came to applying for independent positions, to say that I've worked in these diverse areas. Ailan was very accommodating in giving me a fairly large amount of independence during this postdoctoral position. So we published on the Gold 1 catalysis paper, Gold 1 catalysis project fairly early on. We then went on to look at some other side reactions and developed them into useful synthetic methodologies, which were subsequently published as well, which was quite nice. And we branched out to other metals as well, including comparing gold and indium catalysis, which was quite nice. During this postdoctoral position, I took a more active role in supervising PhD students in that lab, as well as supervising final year project students. So I was really able to, when I came to give it, applying for independent positions, to indicate that this was something that I had a bit of experience with. I was also able to, as I'll mention in a bit, secure some funding from Royal Society of Chemistry to pay undergraduate project students to work on projects of my own over the summer, which was very helpful to me. So if we move on to the slide that's showing now, I'll go through some of my attempts to establish an independent position, an independent career rather. And the first attempt I had was to apply for Royal Society URF funding in early 2015, and which was shortly followed by an application to the Chancellor's Fellowship at Strathclyde, and then to a lecturership in early 2016 in Glasgow. All I'm going to say about these first three attempts is that they were pretty awful, and particularly the URF application I now look back on with some embarrassment. But the real step change for me came with this application later on in 2016 to the Royal Society of Edinburgh Personnel Research Fellowship Scheme, which made it to interview. And I'll talk on the next slide about why this application was so much better than the previous three. And then finally, in late 2016, I applied for and got my current 4-year fixed-term lecturership at Heriot Watt, aka assistant professorship. So I mentioned that there was a real step change when it came to that Royal Society of Edinburgh fellowship application, and the number one factor that really improved that application was partaking in the Heriot Watt Internal Fellowship College scheme. So for those of you that don't have an initiative like this at your institutions, in Heriot Watt, when we want to apply for fellowships, we have to first send an outline to the fellowship panel, which is comprised of 1 or 2 chemists, including at least one in your research area, but also a number of other senior PIs from the School of Engineering and Physical Sciences and members of the research development team at Heriot Watt as well. And their job is to look over your bid and then give you a real raking through the coals in an interview style session before they decide whether you're allowed to submit this fellowship application or not. And I can safely say that that interview process is probably the most unpleasant experience of my research career to date, indeed probably more unpleasant than my PhD viva. But the lessons that I could take from the feedback from that panel were the deciding factor in improving that fellowship application and then improving my successful application to my current position. So you can take lessons from this panel towards fellowship bids, but they're also applicable to bids for applications for lecturerships and so on as well. So if there's a single lesson that I'd like the audience to take away from my slides, is that if there is such an initiative at your respective institutions, I cannot recommend partaking in that highly enough. And if there's not such an initiative, I would definitely recommend attempting to assemble a panel of senior professors, including ones which are not in your research area, to give you a good raking over the coals when it comes to applying for fellowships. The other things that I'll just touch upon, which includes feedback from the fellowship panel that I felt improved that bid and the bid for my current lecturership, were to think about what universities and funders want from a successful applicant. And to my mind, that's 4 things. First of all, that you can deliver on the teaching of undergraduate and postgraduate students. So there's no reason to sit and vegetate in your lab and only concentrate on your research. It's definitely worth going out and getting teaching experience, including demonstrating undergrad labs if you're at the PhD career stage, teaching tutorials if you're a postdoctoral researcher, and also supervising final year and summer project students. Another thing that they're looking for is the ability to obtain funding. We all are aware that universities want us to be bringing in large research council grants. Obviously, that's very hard to do as a postgrad or postdoc worker, but there are sources of funding out there that you can apply for. So small pots of travel money, for example, and one that I've had particular success with in the last few years is the Royal Society of Chemistry's undergraduate research bursary, which provides money to pay an undergraduate worker to come and work under your supervision for 8 weeks over the course of a summer. And it involves writing an application based on your research, as well as the student writing part of the application for themselves. And that, I think, demonstrates that your ideas are fundable, which is something we really want to encourage. Thirdly, a bit of support from industry is always encouraged, as John pointed out. I was fairly lucky in that my industrial supervisor for my PhD still works for Merck and has worked his way up the career ladder, so I was able to get in contact with him, and he very kindly wrote me a letter of support saying that Merck are interested in my research and would be interested in hosting me for symposia at Merck sites in the future and potentially working towards collaborative projects as well. And I could then just staple that letter, or a copy of that letter, into all my funding applications and lectureship applications as well. I also worked closely with the Research and Enterprise Service at Heriot Watt, who are extremely useful in that you can simply create a couple of pages of A4 summary of your research and they'll send it out to all their relevant industrial contacts as well, who can then express interest or not. So I was also able to have secure similar letters of support from, for example, AstraZeneca and GlaxoSmithKline. From that, my starting PhD student, who'll start in October, has been able to secure a 3-month placement at Glaxo to complete towards the end of his second year, start of his third year. And finally, this applies, I guess, more to lectureships than fellowships, although it is still relevant, is collaboration with other researchers at your target institution and at institutions as well. So you'll have noted that I am a synthetic methodologist by trade, but I'm also involved in a couple of medicinal chemistry projects in collaboration with biologists at Heriot Watt. And I think one of the things that spoke very highly in my favour in interview for my current position is being able to say, I have these collaborative efforts set up with these identified individuals in biology to deliver this project. If you don't hire me, that project isn't going to go ahead as quickly. So these are the things I think that the audience should be thinking about when they're looking for their independent positions. And I guess I'll stop there and hand you back to Robert.
That's great, Graeme. Thanks very much. So again, you're starting to see some themes emerging. There's the collaboration. There's also, I think the other thing that struck me was this kind of, both Graeme and John had a kind of vision. They were really kind of wanted to go out. They wanted to learn new things. They wanted to go to new places. They wanted to meet new people and collaborate with new people. So that kind of inquisitive, curious desire to kind of expand their kind of research horizons, I think, has set them both in good stead as well. So thanks very much, Graeme. Thanks, John. I'm just going to talk a little bit more sort of generically. We've had some really good examples there, specific examples. Other things maybe for you to be thinking about as well. really kind of thinking about, I put this up really just to kind of make the point that a lot of people, when they're certainly starting out on their kind of research career, like a lot of you are, you're very much focused on your research. You know, it's probably the most important thing for you, and rightly so. But if you are serious about kind of pursuing this career area in the future, you do need to be thinking about how you develop those other skills, that other experience. So if you do get to sort of Graeme or John's position, this is probably how you're going to be spending your time. So you are going to be teaching, you're going to be doing the research, and you're going to be doing something I've lumped as admin, which sounds very unglamorous. And that's actually because it is, but it's actually kind of reaching out to people. It's doing the grant applications, it's collaborating, it's meeting people, it's networking with people that you might want to collaborate with in the future as well. So while it's obviously important to kind of concentrate on your research, you do need to have a think about what else you're going to add to your CV, to your skill set, to make you kind of attractive to kind of future employers. And this is something that I came across while I was kind of researching this. This is really I put it up as expansion of the scientist. So this is for principal investigator roles, looking at what they do and their responsibilities as well. So principal investigator, that is going to be someone that's going to be named on the grant application, that's going to put the grant application in, and look at the things that they're expected to do. So at the top, you've obviously got scientist, but you've also got research strategist. So thinking about the direction of your research, think about what research you want to be doing, managing that research project, whether it's yourself, whether it's with other sort of undergraduates or postdoc or PhD students working with you, leading a team, being a knowledge broker, being able to share your knowledge with other people, administration I mentioned as well. So that's the kind of ordering stuff in, making sure that grants are doing the paperwork. Promoting your project, very important. Being able to explain your project to other people, being able to get them to buy into it, being able to get almost selling the project to them. Managing stakeholders' expectations. So if you're working with industry or other research groups, how do you manage their expectations? How do you make sure that they're happy with the direction of the research? Managing your resources, that could be time, it could be money. You've got to think about that. And again, something that does appeal to a lot of people, it certainly appeals to John and Graeme as well, is being able to kind of act as a supervisor and a mentor. So not just looking after your own career, but also looking after the career of the people that you're working with or that might be in your research group. So the reason I put that up is just, again, to get you thinking about the other things that you need to be thinking about with your career. You know, focus on the science, focus on your research strategy, but make sure you're not neglecting your skills and developing these other areas as well. So I've asked the question, is your science enough? And I think we can see fairly strongly, no, it's not. You need a range of personal skills to complement your academic achievements. And that really brings us nicely to Marie from Vitae. What's going to make you stand out in your future applications, whether that be for a job or for a academic position or for a grant application? How are you going to stand out from all the other people that are going for similar jobs? So Vitae, we've asked them to join us because they can kind of really help with this. So this is really, I'm going to gloss over this because Alex is going to talk about this much better than I can. So over to you. Do you want to
Right.
Vitae and how you can support these academic researchers, Marie?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to give you a really brief overview of some of the tools and techniques and resources which you as researchers can use to take control of your career development. But first of all, you're probably wondering, what is Vitae? Well, Vitae is a non-profit program that's dedicated to supporting the career development of researchers. And we do this by empowering researchers themselves to take control of their career. We do this by developing resources and tools such as the Researcher Development Framework, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But we also work alongside higher education institutions and research organizations to enhance researcher development provision and training. And for example, we co-organize training or we attend webinars. And finally, we work to influence policy making and policy implementation in this area by conducting research, sharing best practice, and making recommendations to stakeholders. And you can find all of our publications, including a suite of reports, on our website. So we've talked about so far about how your science isn't enough. You're going to need a whole wealth of skills and experience in order to pursue a career in academia. But that can be quite overwhelming, I think, and quite anxiety-inducing, and you might not even know where to start. And this is where professional development planning, or PDP, comes in. PDP is defined as a structured and supported process which is undertaken by an individual to reflect upon their own learning, performance, or achievement, and to plan for their personal, educational, and career development. So as you can see from the definition, PDP is about taking a structured approach to reflecting on and planning for your career development. And in practice, this means regularly carving out time in your busy schedule to think about where you are in your career, where you'd like to go next, and formulating an actionable plan for how to get there. So we've heard from Graeme and from John, for example, that they realized they wanted to get a different kind of experience, or that they needed more publications. So this is where PDP comes in. It's actually taking stock and thinking, what do I want to do next? And you know, carving that time in your schedule is actually very worthwhile, because by engaging in PDP, you'll be able to take ownership and responsibility for your own career rather than just leaving it to chance. It'll also help you to develop a better understanding of your strengths, your weaknesses, and potential areas for development. And finally, I think it will really help you to gain focus and motivation, which will empower you to make some more informed choices throughout your career. If we can have the next slide, please. So what you see on screen here is the Researcher Development Framework, or RDF, which as a researcher should be at the center of your professional development planning. So it's this wheel. It describes the 63 skills, competencies, and attributes of successful researchers, and it's structured around 4 domains. Domain A is knowledge and intellectual abilities, B, personal effectiveness, C, research governance and organization, and D, engagement, influence, and impact. So a crucial aspect of the RDF is that it's deliberately generic and it's deliberately all-encompassing. So it means that some of the descriptors might not apply to your discipline, or they might not be relevant to you at your current career stage. But I think it's important to not let that put you off, because in fact, the generic nature can really help you to take a broader view of your skills in a way that's divorced from your current context, from your current lab or your current project. So the RDF is really here to empower you to consider the bigger picture of what it means to be a researcher, but also where you'd like to go next. Next slide, please. By putting the RDF at the heart of your professional development planning, you'll be able to understand your strengths, identify development areas, but also set goals and priority areas for development. So for example, you could find a job spec that you're interested in, the thing that you'd like to do next, and map the person's specifications onto the RDF, and then compare that map to your own skills to find what are the things that are missing. Is it publications? Is it grant income? Is it outreach experience? In any case, that will help you to kind of have a shopping list of the things that you now need to develop. I also think it's important to say that the RDF provides a common language that will help you to articulate your skills in application forms for jobs, for promotions, but also for grants. So it helps you to use a language which is understood not only in the UK, but also internationally, and both within and outside of academia. And finally, the RDF is also a really useful tool for thinking about transferable skills, the ones that you develop through your research. And I think by thinking about your transferable skills, the RDF can also broaden your career options, and that is both within and outside of academic research. Next slide, please. So if you'd like to take control of your career, I would suggest the following next steps. The first thing that you need to do is ask yourself, where am I in my career? Where do I want to be? What are my values? What do I want? What do I need to get there? And use the RDF to set your priorities for development. Secondly, I would suggest setting yourself some SMART objectives for future actions. So this means they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And while it's good to be ambitious, there's no point setting yourself unachievable goals, because that will only demoralize you. It's also a good idea to reward yourself for meeting your goals. Take time to celebrate your achievements, no matter how small, and this will really help you to stay motivated and excited. And it might also help to be accountable to someone for this progress. So this could be a peer, a mentor, or a supervisor. And finally, start building a portfolio of evidence of your accomplishments and your skills. So start collecting those letters of people who will really support you, and practice articulating this evidence that you've gathered in a succinct but persuasive way, because this will be the key to producing successful job applications and performing well at interview. As you know, it's not enough to claim to be a good communicator or claim to be a good scientist or an impactful researcher. As with anything, you'll need evidence to substantiate your claims. And a really good way to gather that evidence, for example, is using the RDF planner, which is on the next slide, which you can find out more on www.rdfplanner.net, but it's a tool that can help you to gather that evidence and articulate it. But I'm now going to hand you back over to Robert.
That's great. Thanks very much, Marie. So a really useful tool for you there as you're kind of getting maybe towards the end of your PhD. You can do it throughout your PhD, but it's a really good way for you to kind of think about how you want your career to develop, what you need to do to develop it further. So definitely worth taking a look. I'm just going to finish off a little bit, just really talking about the job market. This is something I've really put this in just to again make you thinking about it really. So we looked at some research from jobs.ac.uk, which is probably the UK's kind of biggest and best academic jobs board. They did some research looking at just the number of academic roles that they're advertising. So this is across physical and environmental sciences. So it's not just chemistry, it's basically all the physical roles. But of those, only kind of 20% of that was actually lecturing. And of those, only 40% were permanent roles as well. So I've not put this up to scare you. I've just put it up to kind of make you aware that you're going to be entering a very competitive job market. The other way to think about it is actually think about, how many universities within the UK offer, for example, a chemistry degree. It's probably about 70. When you kind of extrapolate to maybe how many lecturers there are at that university. So, Graeme, have you got a feel for how many lecturers there are at Heriot that are doing chemistry? Rough ballpark figure?
Well, give the caveat that we're quite a small department, but
okay.
Probably around 25 to 30. Okay.
And what about you, John?
So within Lancaster, it's about the same within the chemistry department, and then dotted around the other departments, there's maybe a handful of others. So I would say 25 to 30 across the campus.
So, yeah, so when you extrapolate that to the number of universities, again, you're kind of recognising that there is quite a few. That's quite a small job market to try and enter into. So that's really to get you thinking that actually, your science isn't going to be enough. You've got to kind of look at developing these other skills to kind of succeed in that job market as well. So I'm going to mention briefly kind of where to look. Jobs.ac.uk is a great site, good starting point. Also look at the university websites when they're advertising. But, the area of research that you work in, probably where the research groups are. Start looking at their website, start researching them. Who do you know there? Who do you know that knows someone that works there? Start building up your kind of professional networks. As we both saw from both John and from Graeme, those were really important in making a successful career for them. Again, you can start looking for sources of funding as well. So you don't have to go straight in for a £100,000 grant with a research council. You can build it up, as Graeme did. So start being aware of where else to look for. That website I put at the bottom is a really useful website if you are interested in academic careers. It's got links to where you can look for jobs, but there's also a lot of other useful information on there as well, so well worth taking a look at. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail. Academic CVs are much longer than industry CVs, probably 4 or 5 pages. You need to be thinking about the cover letter, so that's why you want to work at that institution, what you're going to bring to it, what interests you about working there. You might have to do an application form, but that's basically just covering the same information. You might also be asked to develop either a research summary or a research statement. And again, this is kind of looking at making sure that you've got a clear strategic vision of where you want your research to go, what you want it to achieve. So again, paying attention to that is really important. I'm going to finish off just with the support that's available. So this is the support that's available from Vitae. So Marie's already mentioned the RDF. There's a lot of other academic and career support on the Vitae website as well. So I'd definitely have a look on there. Some great research and career stories. And the jobs.ac.uk also has some careers advice for academic careers on there as well. If you want support that's more chemistry focused, the RSC can definitely help with that. We offer a range of postgraduate and postdoctoral career support, the careers management team, which I'm part of. That can be accessed via rsc.org/careers. We can offer individual advice, either face-to-face or by phone or by email. Laura runs a mentoring scheme that can be really useful for you as well. The RSC also offers some funding for grants as well. So again, if you want to demonstrate your track record of securing grants, starting off with RSC applications is a really good way to go. We do have an online CPD recording tool. It's not quite as researcher focused as Vitae's, so I would suggest you have a look at theirs over ours, but it's another kind of tool that you can use if you want to. Going forward, you can look for professional recognition as a chartered chemist or a registered scientist. Again, that can kind of help you stand out. And also think about the member networks that the RSC has. So Graeme's a member of the Early Career Network. Do you just want to say something quick about that, Graeme? What it is and how you think it could help people's careers?
So the Early Career Network's a platform for networking between chemists at an early career stage. We are fairly heavily focused at the moment on providing events and contacts focused towards helping career development for younger chemists and those that have come back to chemistry after a break. So our events will be advertised either through email from Robert or through other RSC media outlets. So please do come along to some of our events in your area if you're able to.
Great stuff. Thank you. If you do have any questions, we have got a little bit of time. If you want to type a couple in, we'll try and get to them. I'm just going to finish off with mentioning the Joliot Curie conference. This is going to be next month in Bath. While it is aimed more at kind of postdoctoral researchers, it's maybe something for you to think about either this year or maybe in a year or two's time. Basically, what we do at this conference is aimed at people that are early career, that looking to try and establish their kind of research careers, but we do go through a process at this conference of actually doing peer review of kind of grant proposals and research interests. So very much what Graeme mentioned he went through. Hopefully this conference is a slightly more supportive environment, not quite as challenging, but if you want experience of getting feedback about your research ideas, it's well worth signing up for this. I think we've got until this weekend to sign up for it if you want to, but we do run it every year. So if it's more relevant for you later on in your career, do keep a lookout for it. So just to finish off, I'm just going to say, at the end of the day, it's your career, so it's your responsibility. Obviously, you've kind of made a first step by kind of joining us today, but do always think ahead. It's quite easy when you've got your kind of head down in the lab or over the computer to kind of just be focused on the here and now. You do need to think ahead. You do need to try and develop a structured approach to try and achieve your career goals and think about what those career goals might be. As we mentioned throughout, really focusing on your science and your research as well as your personal skills is really, really important. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to John, to Graeme, and from Marie for joining us as well. That's my contact information on the screen. If you are an RSC member, we can provide more focused career support for you as well. If you want to get in touch, by all means do so. If you've got any questions, looks like we've got a few coming through now. So I'm just going to try and get to a couple of those. Got it. Okay, so we've got a few come through. So we've got a little while. Being a postdoc research assistant in the UK, there's low pay, job insecurity. Moving to industry. The percentage that end up permanent positions is small. I mentioned that. Pushing out the number of publications, getting teaching experience, writing grants is a huge risk. Any comments on that? Well, what I would say to that is it is a risk, but I think the way to look at it is that if you want to do it, that's what you've got to do. if you do decide as you go through your academic career that an academic career isn't for you, you will still be generating really good transferable skills during that process. So you'll be developing your scientific expertise, you're developing project management skills, you'll be developing collaborating and communication skills that are highly sought after by other employees as well. So a lot of people kind of focus on the science and generating that scientific information, but the other way to look at it is what else you get from doing a postdoctoral position. So that's kind of what I'd say to that. I think it is a risk. The percentage going on to permanent positions, as I mentioned, is pretty small. But if you're interested in it, if you're committed to it, there is a route there. But you do need to pay attention to all those other things as well. So is it better to take longer to complete a PhD and get more publications? Enough results to write a thesis and have 5 publications, funding for another year, so it could stay longer. I guess it depends whether, if you've got funding for longer and you want to make use of it, there's no reason why you can't. Then, obviously more publications you get, the better. The other way to look at it is actually if you can be funded while you're writing those publications, you can also be funded while you're looking to enter the job market as well. So maybe use that time to finish your thesis, to generate the publications, but also use that time to be kind of researching your career options as well. And I'd say that the one thing the proviso I'd add to that is to make sure that you discuss that with your PhD supervisor, make sure they're on board with that, make sure they support you in doing that. They're going to want to know what your plan is. Basically, you're always going to have to sell that as a plan to them, rather than just doing it off your own bat. So I guess if they've got their buy-in, you've got the funding in place to support you while you're doing that, yeah, go for it. You're not going to do any harm. But do be thinking about what else you could be doing while you're writing up as well. You could be researching the job market, you could be building up your professional networks, as well as getting out those publications as well. It's not just about the publications. I think that's something that we've definitely seen from today. So thanks everyone for joining us. I'm going to end it now. So thanks speakers, thanks all you attentive attendees. I hope you found it useful. If you do need more support from the Royal Society of Chemistry, do please get in touch. Thank you.